In a bizarre but fascinating saga that seemed to come out of nowhere last week, Ozy Media, an entertainment production company, was sued by a Beverly Hills investment firm over allegations that a founder impersonated a YouTube executive over the phone in an attempt to secure a $40 million investment from Goldman Sachs. No investment was ever made. However, Lifeline Legacy Holdings, LLC, the firm now suing Ozy, sunk $2 million into the media mammoth, at the time unaware of the fraudulent call.
Ozy frontman and CEO Carlos Watson has blamed his colleague's peculiar impersonation on a mental health crisis and has since embarked on an eccentric media blitz. After first announcing that Ozy would shut down last Friday, Watson doubled back during a Monday interview on the Today Show, formalizing a, quote, imminent comeback. Let's listen.
Let's start with the status of Ozy as we sit right now. Reports that the company shut down on Friday. Is that true? Has the company shut down, or are you still open for business?
You know, we're going to open for business, so we're making news today. This is our Lazarus moment, if you will. This is our Tylenol moment. Last week was traumatic. It was difficult, heartbreaking in many ways. And at the end of the week, we did suspend operations with a plan to wind down. But as we spent time over the weekend, we talked to advertising partners. We talked to some of our readers, some of our viewers, our listeners, our investors. I think Ozy is part of this moment.
So this comes after Ben Smith exposed the company as, for its fraudulent scheme with Goldman Sachs. Joining us now to discuss is breaking media news reporter at the Washington Post, Jeremy Barr. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me.
Ozy's back, huh?
I guess. I don't know if it was ever gone totally. I guess it depends on your question of what it...
Right, if something's never been here...
If something didn't exist in the first place...
Can it go?
Yeah. Right. This calls into question the notion of being and existing and what it means for a company to be active and operational. And I don't really know what that means in this particular case. Because, they're keeping their website going, but I'm not sure if they ever actually shut down technically.
How much do you expect? I mean, how much legal trouble are they going to face given all of this, the fraudulent behavior from the employee Samir Rao, presumably faking this kind of mental health episode and using that as an excuse to possibly defraud Goldman Sachs from for the bogus numbers, so that this company is routinely inflating, saying it has all these millions of viewers and that it was impossible, and now it's known that that's impossible. Do you have any insight into how much, in addition to the humiliation, how much jeopardy they're actually going to be in?
Well, I think in Ben Smith's initial column for the New York Times, he mentioned that I think Carlos Watson said that the FBI had not contacted him about an investigation. But I think the general consensus is that it's very not good to be impersonating people on phone calls over investments. And this lawsuit we had that was filed Monday in California, they're saying just that basically they felt that they were it's called Lifeline Legacy Holdings, and they felt that they were misled because when you're considering a potential investment in a media company, you have the opportunity to do due diligence and to look at the financial documents and talk to the founders. And obviously this fund was saying that they felt misled. They'd been given the confidence that there were other investments coming from bigger entities like Goldman Sachs, and that they were investing under a false pretense. And this is, $2 million was the initial investment, so it's real money, and they're not happy about it. And there could certainly be more lawsuits because they raised, I think, $70 million, and this is just a small piece of that money.
What does it say more broadly about the digital media economy that they were even able to get $2 million, despite the very obvious fact that they don't really exist? I mean, you and I and Robbie and everybody else who does, even casual media consumption could have told you that Ozy was not a real thing. Nobody's ever sent you an Ozy link and been like, you need to read this story that in Ozy. Clearly just a fabrication. A video with 1 million views that has 0 comments on it is not anything real. So if that's so obvious, what does it mean that there are people out there throwing millions of dollars at them?
I mean, I think you have to remember what time this was in terms of the history of digital media. That Ozy was founded in 2013, and at that time, people were talking about BuzzFeed and Vox Media and Vice Media as companies that could be worth $5 billion. Vice's valuation was several $billion, and so $70 million investment in Ozy is a good amount of money, but it's not actually that much when you compare to some of the bigger companies. And basically, a lot of these bigger legacy companies, in addition to the investment funds, were looking for the next big thing in millennial media. And the issue is that paying to promote your content, so you get more views than you should. It's not really illegal, and it is a fairly common practice. But Ozy was taking it probably a bit too far, where essentially they had almost no organic readership. So there was some sleight of hand here, but it wasn't something that was completely out of the ordinary. The phone call that was allegedly impersonated, that was something that was clearly across the line, and hence why they're sort of facing some legal risk from that now.
Yeah. Yeah, and also the viewers should check this out. There's a former employee, his name's Eugene Robinson, who has a post on it might have been Substack or a Substack-like platform, describing his working conditions and how Carlos Watson, who was his boss, made him do these really humiliating, demeaning, belittling things, would make him write like elaborate letters of apology to Carlos Watson and to Samir Rao when he had prioritized his music career over Ozy's non-existent product.
But at least his Substack post or whatever it was is evidence of an actual employee.
Yeah,
which is
I was surprised to see that much. Yeah.
So, Jeremy, how many people worked for this organization? I mean, do you have a sense of how substantial it was as an actual entity?
I think it had 75 employees, which is not that many employees in the context of digital media overall. But I think the whole idea is that it always seemed bigger than it actually was, because they were doing these super flashy events. And if you're putting on this, they did this annual festival, Ozy Fest, which got them sued by Ozfest, by the Osbournes. It was this huge event featuring lots of celebrities, and I interviewed Katie Couric, because she was doing it one year. They got these big names, and they created the impression that they were doing big things, and you just kind of assumed that they had more employees than they did. But the whole idea is that people weren't really reading their articles that much, and so it didn't require a huge staff to put out what they were putting out, which is all they had to do was basically create the impression of a kind of well-populated, well-run, fully staffed media company, and that was good enough for some investors that wanted to get in early on the next big thing.
Yeah, maybe tricking is not the right word, but they were getting very high-profile people to participate in events and interviews. The sort of people who wouldn't do just any kind of favor for any media company.
Clinton, right?
I guess you have, at some level you have to almost admire the grift, working so hard at the grift, where you could have just been working at having a successful media operation, right?
Yeah. Do we know how Hillary Clinton wound up involved in this?
I'm not entirely sure what kind of incentives were offered to do it, but I think it's worth remembering also that Carlos Watson is, he was on TV, he was on CNN, he was briefly an MSNBC anchor. He knew, I think personally, a lot of the people that he was inviting to go onto this festival, so he had that personal connection. And I think people trust other people who are in the TV news business to some degree, that he had that cred, and that's why you saw him go on Today's Show with Craig Melvin and say, Craig, we know each other. He was on CNBC. He was able to sort of talk about a personal connection with that anchor. So he clearly leveraged his relationship, and clearly he was able to basically generate this lineup of people that seemed a little bit incongruent with Ozy's overall popularity, I guess.
And I think you make a really interesting point that a lot of what they were doing was more extreme than what others are doing, but not. It was different in degree, but not in kind, which I think should raise a lot of eyebrows and should raise a lot of questions kind of about the entire, not just digital media infrastructure in our economy, but the entire economy. It's becoming this kind of series of overlapping grifts that are just propped up by each other. And if you pull on one thread, the whole thing collapses.
Well, the digital media companies that Jeremy mentioned, that getting those ridiculous, unbelievable evaluations 8 or 9 years ago, and now they're worth a fraction of that. The BuzzFeed's. Right. I hope its best days are ahead of us, but it's way down in terms of its value, Vice, et cetera.
Right. BuzzFeed bought Huffington Post, which had sold for $315 million in 2011. Right. I think BuzzFeed just recently acquired it for basically nothing, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, the values have dropped a lot. And, those valuations were always theoretical because someone had to actually pay the money. And I don't know if there were that many of us who were covering digital media who actually thought somebody would pay, $4 billion for Vice. But these were big, flashy numbers. And these are also privately held companies. So there's no way to really see their financials the same way you would for like the New York Times, which is traded. So there's a lot of taking their word for it. And a lot of these valuations came from kind of invested parties that wanted to make the company look a little bit bigger. But everything's changed. These companies are now worth a lot less.
If you're a wealthy person with 10 or hundreds of millions of dollars, you spend it. I'm a libertarian. Spend it however you like, but please do not operate under any assumption that you're going to make back your money, let alone a profit, by investing it in a digital media space. So that word of caution there. And we'll have. Thanks so much, Jeremy, for being with us. We'll have more Rising after this.